My first encounter with the dead that I can remember. I had to have been about 7 years old when my first big encounter happened. At this point in time, I went to daycare and it was set in a really old church. This place was massive. The people watching us would take us to the gym that was parallel with a cafeteria. In the cafeteria, there was also a massive stage with a lot of room underneath it, and it was covered by some wood that had huge round holes, so you could see underneath. Then across the room was the kitchen with bathrooms to the right of it. A bunch of us were playing on and around the stage. I just happened to catch movement out of the corner of my eye underneath the stage. So of course, being a kid, you want to see what it is. What I saw was a big furry thing, like a wolf, but not a wolf. It kind of scared me. But I didn't even know I was there. I just kept quickly pacing the length of the stage. No one else could see. And I got called stupid by the older girls. Joke's on them. Later that day, the older girls decided to play Bloody Mary in the bathroom. This bathroom was horror movie worthy. Dimly lit. Stalls that felt like they were isolated from the rest of the rooms. Just creepy. So, they all lined up in front of the mirror and told me I couldn't join, and that I had to turn the lights off and then back on when they wanted. They said Bloody Mary 3 times, and lo and behold, the mirror started to glow a greenish white. So for calling me stupid earlier, I closed the door and held it shut for probably about a minute, pretending I couldn't open it. High-pitched laughter woke me up from my sleep. Hey guys, I need some clarification. Something happened to me almost a decade ago, and I want to know your insights as to what you guys think it is. I was in 6th grade, playing Bloody Mary with my friends during the daytime, and then the same night near 2:30 a.m., I wake up to the sound of a pin drop. My window was open, and the screen door was shut to let the air in because it was a hot night. I don't know how, but my eyes just shot wide open, and my mind felt clear and awake, no grogginess, no nothing. I live on a main street with houses surrounding the street, so just imagine hearing something very faint that you can't quite discern yet. That faint noise came closer, coming down the street in a zigzag motion from house to house, as if it were checking on people who were awake. As the sound grew closer to me, I heard a laughter. It was high-pitched, it was fast, and it wouldn't stop laughing. It sounded like someone or something thought something was very funny. It stopped at my window, and it wouldn't stop laughing. The laugh kept growing louder too, and I friggin' ran out of my room and slept with my parents. That same night, I dreamed of befriending a demon girl, and she told me that everything would be okay. In this part, I think it was just my imagination running wild, but the next morning I woke up with a fever. I was not sick the night before whatsoever. The next day I went to school, I was in shambles. I was scared to death, and it took me until the middle or the end of the day to start talking again. I don't understand what that was, and I don't think I ever will. The point is, I think something was messing with me for shits and giggles. Hell, I don't even know if I want to know your opinions anymore. I'm shaking a little inside. This story isn't a joke. And I really don't think that it was just some random person pulling a prank, because the way the laughter traveled down the street and the way that I woke up, I don't think this was from the works of a person. Edit. I understand this is an extremely bizarre experience. You can choose not to believe or to believe, but I really stand by my word when I say that this isn't due to some fever delirium or exploding head syndrome. It happened. It wasn't some random guy standing outside my window. It happened. It traveled down the street in zigzag motion, like if you have 2 speakers and laughter would be taking turns playing from each speaker, like back and forth. Only the sound was gradually getting louder, traveling closer towards my window. sharing some experiences with you all. Hello everyone. I've been reading plenty of stories on here and decided to share my own. Okay, here it goes. All that I am sharing is true. It's up to you to believe. I was 3 years old. I'm 18 now. And my grandfather had just passed away. So my parents and I went to the Philippines to see our family over there and pay our respects. When we got there and greeted my family, we headed to my uncle's house. And it was a big house. And only a few people were in this house during our stay. After eating and unpacking, me and my parents decided to go to sleep. As we were laying in bed, my mom told me this, and my dad can recall it as well, that I said, "Tatay," which is grandfather in Tagalog, is here. He's walking around me. As you can imagine, my mother was emotional since that was her father, and I never got to actually meet him, unfortunately. The second story was another occurrence while my cousins decided to sleep over the apartment my parents and I lived in. I was probably like 5 or 6 years old, around there. One of my cousins was a daring one, and she decided us to play Bloody Mary. I was a chicken when I was a kid, so you can't imagine how scared I was, and how against it I was. But I had no choice, as for my cousins were older than me, and wanted to do it. They were all girls too, but I was the youngest. Since the apartment was so small, me and my 4 cousins had to sleep on a fold-out bed. We didn't do Bloody Mary in the bathroom, though. We did it on the fold-out bed all together. And after that, everything was still and dead silent. In a matter of seconds, a ball, like those you find in the crates of like Stop and Shop or Walmart, was thrown, and I was hit in the head with it. All of my cousins all screamed, and they were like, "Who just threw that?" In fact, now that I recall it, the ball came from where our bathroom was. And then we saw a little mist come out, to my memory, and for some reason, it was like a skull was inside the mist. And after the screams, my mom came out of her bedroom and asked what was going on. My cousin asked her if she threw a ball at us, and my mom replied, "No." You can imagine the confusion and horror we all had, so we all cuddled up and eventually went to sleep. To this day, my cousins are afraid of sleeping over, even if it is in a different house. My third story. A few years after that, and it is 2001, I was then 8 years old, and my grandfather on the other side had passed away. I was in my cousin's house here in New York, and I was hanging out with them. One of my younger cousins, who wasn't born when story number 2 happened, was in the attic. I was downstairs with my aunt and other cousin and watching TV, and then she decided to make lunch. I checked on my cousin in the attic, and he was playing with the computer when I saw him, so I went back downstairs to watch TV for a while. Then my aunt said that lunch was ready, and she asked for me to call and get my cousin upstairs. I complied and proceeded to call him, but no answer, so I went fully up the stairs and I told him that we had to eat. And he said he was busy playing with somebody. I was surprised and said, "Who are you playing with?" And he said, "Tate." And I was surprised and scared a little bit. In disbelief, I asked him again, and he reassured me that he was playing with him, playing toys. I couldn't believe it, but I did think that our grandfather was looking after us. Shortly after, his mom came up and told my cousin it's time to eat, and he quickly responded and got up and proceeded downstairs. I remember just gazing at the toys, then just going down to join them. Well, those are my stories, and I can remember them fondly. If there are stories that any of you would like to share, then please go ahead. I'd love to read it. Seeing the paranormal? I've never been one to share this, thinking people would just joke about it and not take it seriously. But maybe people here can clarify for me the situation, or simply comment on it. So back when I was younger, about 11 or 12, I'm not sure, I was a pretty paranoid person. Just little things that ran through my imagination, never being practical or possible. Just me, being paranoid. An example, I always closed my closet door, but left the door entering my room open, because I figured a burglar or simply a monster like a werewolf or something would be in there and would make noise, and I would be able to run out of my main door. So one day, when I was at a Boy Scout meeting in a church, my friend turned to me and said, "Dude, did you know if you go into the bathroom and turn the lights off and stare into one of your eyes' reflections and say something like, 'Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, come alive,' a ghost will pop out and start haunting you until you turn the lights on." I know it wasn't the Bloody Mary game. It was more along the lines of what I said. So, I really didn't want to go about testing his theory, being a scared person and all. However, after he continuously told me to do it, I said I'll do it with the lights on. So I entered the bathroom, closed the locked door, and walked to the sink, where the mirror was, with the lights on. I did as he said, staring at my eyes, reciting the chant, if you will. I was waiting, feeling an intense amount of suspense. Thankfully for me, nothing happened. I figured that what he told me was pretty much BS and shrugged it off, returning home. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. I simply ate dinner, played some games, and went to bed. I slept for a couple hours, but randomly woke up at the hour of 1 or 2. This was a pretty common occurrence for me, as I frequently had nightmares and was just very unrestful. I ignored this and laid in bed, just trying to go back to sleep. After about half an hour of laying there with my eyes closed, I decided I wouldn't get any sleep in my bed tonight. I figured I'd go sleep with my parents, them having a king-size bed, and it being pretty common for me since I was 12-ish. I went out of my room and stood at their door, not wanting to wake them. I quietly rotated the doorknob and slid open the door. The bed was to the right of the door. I stepped in and closed the door, not having looked at the bed yet, focusing on the quietness of my actions. Once I'm inside, I turn and see something out of the ordinary. Kneeling in between my parents, both knees on the bed, body straight, head down, facing my mother left side of the bed, when looking at the foot of the bed, was a figure, seemingly having the same structure as my brother, with an identical pillow in his hand. I stood there looking, figuring my brother had the same problem and was waiting for my mother to say, "Yeah, you can sleep here tonight." Nothing happened for about 30 seconds. I decided to verify the fact that what I saw was my brother. I turned around and opened the door, again being very cautious as to not make a sound. Once out of the door, I turned to the right and proceed towards my brother's room. I opened the door, and to my worst fear, my brother is laying in his bed. Up until this point, I had completely forgotten about the chant I did at the scout meeting earlier. I was in shock. I closed the door, returned to my parents' room, cracked the door, and looked at the bed, focusing more on who or whatever was on their bed. It seemed to be much more visible than anything else in the room, seeming white or pale gray of color. At this point, I was completely awake. There was no way I was getting sleep in my own bed, because I was freaked out and just over 10. I went to my brother's room and slept in his queen-size bed with him. Everything continued normally for about 2 or 3 days. Then came a second occurrence. It starts out pretty much the same. Everything was normal that day, and I went to bed, waking up early in the morning again. I planned on not going into my parents' room, so I laid, restless in bed for over an hour. I finally decided that what I saw was just my mind playing tricks on me, right? So I went through the same process, making sure to stay quiet. This time, however, what I saw was what I saw was something that was completely different. My parents had a nightlight to the right of their bed, which shined on my dad's face. I tell you this because above his head, there seemed to be another head, resembling his own head, staring right at me. There was then a hand beckoning me with a finger. I don't know why, but I walked to my mother's side of the bed, laid on the floor, and tried sleeping. However, it was quite a difficult task to do, knowing that there was something other than my parents in the room. Also, anywhere I looked, the hand just came out of said place. Example, like the ceiling, the closet, the door, and beckoned me the same way, with a fist, index finger out, curling and uncurling. I don't know why, me being freaked out, paranoid self, but I didn't leave their room that night like I did the other night. I simply took the spare pillows of my parents' bed and made a little mattress on the ground next to their bed and slept there. That was my last encounter to this day. I still don't know if it was the paranormal or just my mind, but it has freaked me out so badly that I don't look in a mirror for more than 3 seconds nowadays, just to avoid anything else like that. It's only the wind. So, a little backstory. Grew up in South Texas. I'm Hispanic, as if that was a surprise. My parents are divorced, and in this case, I'm going back and forth for visitations. Weekends in summer, you know the deal. Anyways, as you know, Hispanics and Mexicans have a deep and rich mythology and beliefs. I was first told of La Lechuza when I was about 12 or 13. My stepfather was telling us stories around the fire pit in the backyard one night. Me, my stepbrother, sister, and mom. The usual stuff. Bloody Mary, the Lorna, and others. It was pretty late at night, but being that it was summer, we kids didn't really have a bedtime. So, he starts talking about La Lechuza and the noise they make, what to look for, and a little about the history or lore behind it. He even taught us how to make the whistle sounds with your hands. During him showing us this, the wind picked up a little bit. Haven't been still at night. This only added to the effect. Little did I know that what I would experience later that summer would prove that what he told us that night to be true. The night goes on, and he continues to tell us stories. Eventually it gets late, and he runs out of beers and we go to bed. The rest of that summer was pretty uneventful. My siblings and I did the typical kid stuff. Parks, pool, and exploring the neighborhoods. Summer winds down, and I and my sisters have to return to my dad's. During the summertime, my dad and stepmom had moved to a new house. Nothing creepy or anything, just closer to schools and such. Anyways, I show up and, of course, being the new kid on the block, I run into some of the other kids that live there, namely Chris, who lived right next door to me, and Danny lived at the end of the block. This is important. My house was situated in about the middle of the block. It was a pretty long street that didn't have much traffic, so we were riding our bikes in the street. Back then, we could do stuff like that and not have to worry. This is how I met these guys. I was riding my bike, a yellow Rooster BMX. I stripped all the non-essential stuff off of it when I originally got it for my birthday. You know, the brakes, reflectors, etc., all the baby stuff. So I'm riding around and Chris calls out to me, Hey! You want to race?" We hadn't really talked, and this was the first time I'd met them. Danny and him, both on their bikes, had been friends for a while. I looked over and said, "Sure." You guys know how it is at that age. You think you're invincible and nothing can touch you. You're the fastest thing on 2 wheels, which would soon have a whole new meaning to me later. We line up on the street in front of my house. At Chris's mark, we take off. We are neck and neck for the first couple of yards, but I soon pulled up ahead and passed them to a great degree. The race was the end of the block, where Danny's house was. I had won, beat them with half the block to spare. Once they had caught up, You're pretty fast, man. What kind of bike is that? Chris asked, panting from pushing himself. Yeah, man. Where'd you learn to ride that fast? This time it's Danny asking, also breathing pretty heavy and sweating a bit. Don't know. Just fast, I guess. I tell them. Wasn't that always the answer? We soon became pretty good friends, going to each other's houses and stuff, riding our bikes together and staying overnight at each other's houses. Now I know what you're thinking. What does this have to do with the main story? I'm getting there. So, one weekend, I asked to stay over at Danny's house. Dad and stepmom say yes. He just lived down the block, not like I was going across town. It's getting on with the day, and we have been playing here and there riding our bikes. Mine and Chris's house had a little alley behind them that made the perfect clubhouse. It was starting to get overcast and was close to getting dark. For some reason or another, we start talking about Lalachusa and other things. I forgot to mention there is a pretty big tree in the area, between mine and Chris's house, right where the sidewalk is. Really bushy, mosquitoes if I remember correctly, that hangs over the street. Well, while we're talking, we hear a bunch of birds in the tree, no big deal. We keep talking, exchanging stories and ideas, when suddenly, it starts to get really windy. Like almost push you over. It's not that normal wind kind of windy, as some of you know the stories. Me and Danny look up and see this huge black bird in the tree. As we are staring at it, it's sitting at the topmost part of the tree. It opens its wings and we hear a whistle. We look at each other wide-eyed and then over at Chris, who wasn't there anymore. He saw what we were looking at and noped it out of there, seeing as we were right in front of his house. Me and Danny had the same idea and turned on our bikes and started to haul ass down the street. Why, you might ask, when my house was right there? It just so happens that my parents and brothers and sisters were not home. The house was locked and I had no key, hence me staying at Danny's. Why not go into Chris's house, you say? His mom thought we were a bad influence on him, so she really didn't allow us in the house. So we're racing away from this thing, and that's when it happened. The wind, which was blowing pretty good, almost tripled in its force. For those of you who ride bikes or runs know this feeling, like you're getting nowhere no matter how hard you try. And we were trying. Over the course of what little summer we had left, we would constantly race each other and gone to where we were a match. Well, as fast as a preteen can go, on a one-speed bike that is. Faster and faster we go, and the faster we try, the harder the wind pushes back. We were about halfway to his house when I turn and look to see if that huge thing was following us, or if we were just running for the hills for no reason at all. That's the moment I dreaded the most. When I first saw the bird, it looked to be the size of a vulture. I couldn't really tell, the tree branches obscuring my view, but now it was in the air and it was flying after us. I swear, the wings reacted from one side of the street to the other. It was as black as midnight, and I'm glad that I couldn't make out its face. That was all it took. My mind said nope, and my legs had never pumped so friggin' fast in my life. There I was going down the street like a kid possessed by the devil himself, and Danny was right beside me the whole way. The wind never ceased its relentless push against us, like trying to keep us from getting to the safety of his house. It was like trying to run in water. You know you're making progress, but it's slow and it hurts. By some miracle, we made it to his front lawn, jumped off, ditched our bikes where they landed, and ran our butts inside. Danny's mom, who only spoke Spanish, jumped when we came busting in through the door. Laughingly, she says, "What happened? What's wrong with you?" Danny looks at her and tells her, through breaths, that we were racing, and were just out of breath. We go to his room, which by the way faces the front lawn and street, and start to try and calm ourselves. That's when we heard the first whistle. We both looked at each other and jumped to close the blinds of his windows. All night, we were here scratching at the windows every once in a while. Which we chalked up to the wind. By the way, when we got in the house, the wind suddenly died down to nothing, followed by a low whistle. I don't remember when exactly we fell asleep, but we eventually did. The next morning, we got up and went out to see if our bikes were still intact. They were, and they were still where they had landed. Mine near the porch and his in the bushes to the side of the door. We never talked to anyone about what happened after that. It just sort of got forgotten. I later found out that part of my stepmom's family believed heavily in this sort of thing, and my adolescent mind came to the conclusion that she had sent it to watch me. Well, that's my story, at least the way I remember it. This was almost 22 years ago, but it, among some other experiences I had, is something I will never forget.